Well, God bless you today. Welcome to our Cornerstone Wow, a Word on Wednesday. I'm Pastor Augustus T. Curry. It really is a joy and delight to share the study of the Lord's Word with you once again. As always, I'm grateful for our videographer, Brother Cedric Bryant, and the awesome job that he does. I appreciate him so very much. We're in the midst of a short series dealing with becoming a person after God's own heart. Becoming a person after God's own heart. The premise is that David in the Bible is one who certainly had many flaws, one might say, faults and failures, but yet through it all he was able to find favor with God because of his faith and because he had a heart for God. He had a heart for God. The Bible describes him as an individual who was after God's own heart. And so we want to look at some scenes in the life of David that we might study and gain some insight how we likewise might become an individual after God's own heart, and certainly as a consequence receive the favor of God as well. Our first study dealt with 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. We saw much about the background of David, how he was attentive, diligent, responsible, and faithful in his job, even as a young boy, being a shepherd over his father Jesse's sheep. We saw where he was the youngest in the family, the youngest son, had 7 or 8 other brothers. We saw when it was time for King Saul to be taken off the scene as king of Israel, that they were looking for a king. The Lord sends a man to Jesse's house and lets him know that the king is going to come out of this house. It's going to be one of Jesse's sons. When he gets there, they go through the whole family. Jesse brings in all of his sons, one after the other. The man says, no, this is not him. He says, listen, finally, there must be another son you have somewhere. And Jesse, David's own father, says, well, yeah, there's one other boy, but he's out in the pasture looking after my sheep. The man says, well, we're not going to leave till we get the one, so bring him on in, please. He finally comes in, and it's revealed that David would in fact be the anointed king of Israel that was to come. And so David's own personal background gives us insight as to how he became a person after God's own heart. He was faithful in his duties. It may not have seemed much to the other brothers. Matter of fact, notice that the brothers did not even suspect that he possibly could be the one who would be chosen to be king. Even his own father, Jesse, did not suspect it. That's why he was the last one to be brought in. But when he finally does come in, that's when the oil runs out. He's anointed to be future king of Israel. It says something about the person who desires to have the right heart. We saw last week where man looks on the outside, but God looks on the inside. David may not have looked like, may not have the appearance that his other brothers had, but because of his heart, he had the right heart. I shared with you how the late great Congressman John Lewis may not have been the best in oratory, may not have had the great stature that others might have, but yet he had the right heart and went on to become a great man, legendary in fact, legendary Congressman John Lewis. And so we even shared with you how Jesus himself, looking at his earthly environment growing up, may not have been considered by many, in fact, was not considered by many to be of much. Growing up, being born, not homeless, but certainly houseless, because you do know you can have a house and still not have a home. And Jesus shows us you can have a home and not even have a house. He's born in a manger. He's born outside of the house, but he's born in a loving home. He goes on to become one who dies on an old rugged cross. It does not look very good that day. Does not look very good that night, that weekend, but then early Sunday morning, God shows us what he can do even with that which does not look promising. Finally, 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 18 says, Then answered one of the servants and said, Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, that is cunning and plain, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, and a comely person, good-looking person, and the Lord is with him. That last line, the Lord is with him. When you have the right heart, when you have a heart for God, the Lord will be with you and will bless you in your battles. That actually leads to our study today in 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17. There was a movie out some time ago. I believe it was entitled The Bear. The picture, in essence, dealt with a giant Kodiak bear. Ends up adopting a little cub, orphan cub, models its life after this giant Kodiak bear. Everything he sees the Kodiak bear do, he imitates, tries to do it himself. He sees how the big bear eats honey from the beehives. He imitates that. He sees how the big bear scratches its back against the tree stumps. He does that as well. He sees how the big bear catches fish in the streams with his giant paws. The little cub tries to imitate him in that. All of that, this little cub imitates the Kodiak bear in that way. One day, the picture reveals that the little cub is playing out in the field by itself. And suddenly on the scene there appears a pretty big and ferocious mountain lion. Mountain lion sees the cub and begins to stalk the cub, chases the cub. Finally, after two giant leaps, catches up with the cub. Lion bear is about to devour the cub, but then all of a sudden, that little cub, in its last act of desperation, does what it had seen the Kodiak bear do on previous occasions. That little cub just stands up on its hind feet and begins to make the largest growl, the loudest growl, if you will, that it could possibly make. It wasn't much, but that was all it could do as the lion got ready to devour that little cub. But then all of a sudden, that lion jumps back and hurriedly runs away. And then the camera pans back and you can see 20 feet behind the little cub, that big Kodiak bear on its hind legs, growling with its arms open. And of course, that's the reason why the lion ran. What the movie demonstrated to us in a very vivid manner is that oftentimes when you're facing circumstances that are really more than what you can handle, you don't have to panic if you have the right backup. You will face some challenges in this life that will seem like a roaring lion. But you got to realize while that's in front of you, you don't have to despair if the Lord is behind you. Because if you have a heart for the Lord, the record is clear. He'll stand behind you and he'll be your backup so that no matter what is in front of you, it cannot defeat you as long as the Lord is with you. I believe that's one of the things this text is tailored to teach us in 1 Samuel chapter 17 today, as we see another scene in the life of David. On this occasion, the armies of Israel are being intimidated by the Philistine army. Back then, very often in ancient times, as opposed to armies fighting one another and much of the spoil being spoiled, they would simply choose a champion from each of the armies, and the champions would fight to death. And the winner of that fight would declare victory for the people that champion represented. And the Philistines chose this champion named Goliath. He's taunting Israel, send out a man to fight me. Let's get this done with. And verses 1 through 4 give us the scene for this taunting. And Philistines are on one side, the top of the valley on the mountain. Then you got the valley, and then at this other plateau, you have the children of Israel. He's taunting them across the valley. Come on, send somebody out. Everyone in the Israel army is scared to death of the man. After all, the Bible gives his stature. He is in fact a giant of a man. Many people have speculated across the years how exactly large was Goliath. There's really no need to speculate. You simply have to know about measurements in ancient Africa, and certainly how our ancestors made measurements from the pyramid on down. The Bible says in verse 4 that there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits, and a span. 6 cubits and a span. 6 cubits and a span. Now, a cubit is 2 spans. Span is considered to be 9 inches. A span is the distance between a grown man's thumb and his pinky when the hand is stretched out. The way man was created. We're created in a wonderful way, the Bible reminds us. And so if you take your thumb and put it on the ruler, can you see the ruler in the camera? All right. From tip of my thumb to tip of my pinky finger, mine is just a little bit longer, but for the average person, it's an average grown man, it's 9 inches. 9 inches, all right? Now, the length between your elbow and the tip of your middle finger is double that, the way man was created. So the length from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger, that's 18 inches. All right? So you were made for the space between your thumb and your pinky to be exactly 1/2 of the space between your elbow and the tip of your top finger. And so that's how you could measure things in ancient times without having rulers on you. You could just use your body to make measurements. And so the Bible says, how tall is Goliath? It says he is, verse 4 again, he is 6 cubits and a span. So if he's 6 cubits, first of all, that means it's 6 times 18 inches. So if he's 6 times 18 inches, 6 cubits, that means he's 108 inches. And then it says, and a span. And so if a span is 9 inches, that means he's 117 inches tall. So he's 9 feet 9. So he is in fact a giant of a man. And then when you read what he's wearing, the helmet of brass and all of that on with a coat of mail, and it talks about how much the coat he wears weighs and all of that. He's not only a giant of man of great stature, but he's got on clothing of warfare. Even verse 7 has a staff of his spear, it says, was like a weaver's beam. His spear's head was heavy. Everything with him says giant. He's giant. He's a giant Philistine. And he has the tools to back it up. And so David is facing this. No one else would speak up. David says, well, let me go. And of course, his brothers and others around there said, what do you know about fighting giants? And the giant, I believe it's verse 33, the giant's been fighting since he was a child. He was trained to fight. He's trained to fight. He's trained to fight. Saul says to David, matter of fact, verse 33, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him. For thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. That meant the giant had been fighting and trained in fighting as long as David had been living. And so what do you do when you're facing giants in life? What do you do when you're facing roaring lion circumstances ahead of you? How do you make it through? Well, I believe David realized what we discovered in that movie, The Bear, that is not so much what's in front of you as it is who is behind you. David knew that the Lord was with him. When David would look back over his life, even as a shepherd boy, and on an occasion he had to fight a lion. Another occasion he had to fight a bear just to protect his father's sheep. And he recognized that it was the Lord that had given him victory after victory over the bear, over the lion. And he realized that the Lord had been with him. The Lord, in fact, was his shepherd. And because of the Lord's past history with him, he knew that his future was secure. And so he stands up to the giant and faces him not in fear, but faces this giant in faith. And in this season of pandemic, you have some challenges in front of you. And I want you to know, first of all, there's a difference between foolishness and faith. There's a difference between foolishness and faith. Foolishness is saying that you believe God will protect you, so you're not going to wear a mask. You're just going to go anywhere and do anything, no mask, no sanitization, no social distancing. Trust me, that's those who cater to that foolishness. That's not faith. That is, in fact, foolishness. God will keep you, but he does give you some responsibilities to help keep yourself. And so we just don't, Bible said, do not tempt the Lord, thy God. That's tempting the Lord. Lord, take care of me. You told me I'm your child, so I'm just going to go out here and do whatever. No, that's tempting the Lord. That's not having a heart after God. Trust me, that's not pleasing to God. What is pleasing to God is trusting God and being responsible with what He's trusted you with. He's trusted you with a mind. He's trusted you even with wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and so He gives us insight to wear our mask and to keep social distance. You can be social distance and not be spiritually distant. And so I'm not pressed by people who think that the church ought to be meeting inside every Sunday these past 2 years. No, the Lord gives us common sense to go along with our faith. And so we don't tempt the Lord like that. We go back in when the Lord says it's safe to go back in, when He leads us in that way. And so confronting our giants, remember that if the Lord is with you, again, 1 Samuel 16, verse 33, if the Lord is with you, you can face your giants confidently, knowing that the Lord is with you. And that's what helps to develop a heart for God, having faith that God is with you, not acting foolish, but acting responsibly with faith. So it's a large giant. We all will face large giants in life. Changing a career, choosing a school, choosing to go back to school, choosing a place to live, moving in-state or out of state. All of these are challenges that can be daunting, at least daunting to a certain extent, but not so much if you recognize the Lord is with you. If you recognize the Lord is with you, you're able to confront these things. Sickness, loved ones with sickness. The Lord is with you. You can make it. There's no need to despair. You don't know how things are going to work out with your family, with your children, with loved ones. The Lord is with you. You can face these giants. All of us will have these giants. The enemy wants you to think that the giants you face are that the giants you face are unusual, as if you're the only one facing these giants. But you do know David had 5 smooth stones. Someone said, well, why would he have 5 smooth stones? It's just one giant. That's because the giant had brothers. Yeah, you're going to discover that the giant you have is not the only giant out there. All of us have some giants to face. And even after you're able to slay this giant, don't be surprised if some of his brothers show up. But again, the Lord provided 5 stones for David to use. And so God always gives you exactly what you need, and in fact, more than what you need, so that you can face not only the giant that's in front of you now, but ones that might come later on. And so David faces the giant. He's able to slay him because he recognizes that it's not just him that's fighting, but it's the Lord that he's connected to. One day there was a nursery school teacher, and the teacher asked the students, are you stronger than my thumb? Student says, of course, teacher, yeah, we're stronger than my thumb. She said, well, come wrestle my thumb. And the students came, stood in line, and tried to wrestle the teacher's thumb. and of course were unable. He said, now why were you unable to overtake my thumb? And finally, one of the children said, teacher, we weren't able to overcome your thumb because your thumb is connected to your body. I think that's what David is teaching us in this text today. You're going to face some giants that are so much larger than you. But if you are a person after God's own heart, if you're connected to God, your giants cannot overtake you because of who you're connected to. And so the giant is larger than you, but your God is larger than the giant. And as long as you stay connected to him, you can come out victoriously. David had a heart for God. David had a hunger for God. David had a longing for God. David had a trust in God. And because of that, David was able to face his giant in a great way. He ends up slaying the giant Goliath, chopping him off, chopping off his head, in fact, and bringing victory back to his people. And his people were able to gain the spoil from the Philistines. That's an awesome thought today. That no matter what you're facing, no matter what you might have to face in the future, it may be larger than you, but it's not larger than the God whom you're connected to. If you have a heart for him, he will make a way for you to overcome. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Don't get discouraged in this season. The Lord is with you. He's behind you. And as long as you have a heart for him, he'll be the shepherd that you need. God bless you today. Thank you for tuning in. I pray you've been blessed by this meditation, this study on today. Can't wait to see you next Wednesday at noon. God bless you.